Hello there! Today we're going to be making a few marbles. My name is George from Pavliscak Studios. All marbles will be made out of glass rods. I'm using a brand of glass that's Moretti. It has a specific coefficient of expansion, so all the colors and the different sizes of rod that I've purchased, made, and pulled all have the same compatibility for expansion and contraction. I'm going to make two marbles today, I hope, if I have the time. The first will be a tornado. Oops. Sorry, camera malfunction here. That's from a previous. There we go. Alright, the first one is going to be a tornado, and the next one will be a blue flower that I'm making for a charity auction. If it comes out. So the first thing we'll need to do for our tornado marble is make sure that we have all the materials set. The marble's mostly clear. It's got some color. It's got some noble metals, silver and gold. And it also has some UV active glass. The UV active glass comes from a glass factory in the 1800s. And let me get a piece and I'll show you. So this stuff is very old. It's from the late 1800s. It's got a little hole in the middle of the rod. I mix it with clear because it's very powerful glow, and mixing it about half and half with clear lets the opacity disappear, so I only see the glow when I mix it in with my marbles, especially when they're mostly clear. So I'll be using that as part of my marble, and the clear colors are essentially just a dot of the color and a dot of the UV active glass. And I will have to make sure that I have ready little pieces of gold and silver, which I have cut out of leaf, and I will show you those. Here's the silver. It goes on my little, oops, it's tricky stuff. It goes on my graphite marvering plate. You can see I have a little box of all the little pieces of silver already cut. But I have them in a box so they won't blow away. Now here's the box that has gold in it. And what's funny is I just temporarily put these things in these boxes like 25 years ago, and I'm still using these boxes for that. Alright, here's the gold. It's backed on rouge paper because it's very prone to just almost blowing away and disappearing into nothing. And I will leave the rouge paper on the glass, and when I pick it up, it will vaporize. A little puff of smoke. You might actually hear it go foomp, but it doesn't smell good. Anyway, this is a demonstration that I can only do when my doors are closed and there aren't people walking around, unless I missed some water on my graphite marvering plate to hold it in place. Sometimes it doesn't pick up quite as well if it's moist like that, but it does keep it from blowing off and getting lost. You don't want to have too many of those set out at a time, just because they get misadjusted and it makes a big mess. Anyway, here is a new clear rod, and you see, rather than being clipped, someone cut this with a saw, which is weird. So when I flash this, which means pushing it back and forth across the flame, it's going to get a lot of impurities coming to the surface from that cut line, and so you'll see me tweezing it away to get it clean. It's called peeling the rod or stripping the rod, and getting these big rods ready to go often takes a little bit of time. So now I'm going to start flashing this rod, and when I'm doing that, I'm getting the temperature up to just over the first strain point in the glass where it tends to want to pop and explode and crackle, and that's about 500 degrees. So, how's it going? It's the boring part. There's a lot of waiting in glass. It's kind of meditative. You do your reheat, you get to play for a few seconds, then you do another reheat. The glass that I use is long working and fast, so I can get it up to temperature pretty fast. And since I'm working small too, I'm not constantly putting it in the furnace and heating it up 100 degrees and then rolling it out on a plate, taking 2 hours to make some boring tumbler or whatever. So it's not horrendously boring to watch. I'm still flashing this. It hasn't popped yet. I'm glad, because my face is right next to it. Alright, I'm getting close now. I'm going to let it sit in the flame for a second and see if it's ready, and it is. It's starting to glow orange, and I can see it's starting to bump back into that little droplet kind of shape where it starts to pull back and form its first gather. But there's a bunch of crap on the end. So I'm going to tweeze that off. That's where that saw cut line was. So for the tornado, it's essentially a bunch of clear blobs. Oh look, it's Barbie! A bunch of clear blobs put onto this rod with little dots of color and metal in between. So the first thing I'll do is I'm going to get a fairly sizable gather on this. And the way to get a gather on a rod is you're turning the rod to keep it from flopping downwards like that. But you've also got it angled back a little bit like this. And so as you turn it, it's rolling down on itself. And that rod is making a bigger and bigger gather. And there's really a point where you get to maybe about 60 to 70% over the original diameter of the rod, where it's going to start to fall. Oh, Marcia and Jim just said hi with exclamation points.
Hey guys, I'll be on in a second. I gotta get my beer started.
Barb was just out running, so she needs a minute or two to get herself on her computer or whatever. Alright, that gather is starting to form. So, if you guys have seen some of my other demonstrations where I make a disc that I flatten, like if I'm doing a flower, I even flatten it more than I would if I just went squish. So I have a bigger drawing area on that disc to do the flower. And I'll show that for the second marble. But for this one, I just need that semi-flat surface to start stacking my dots and my clear layers. And I'm just about ready here. So I'm going to squish it down. I'm going to squish it down on a paddle so you guys can see it.
We need a sponsor.
Yeah, it's me. Go to my website and buy some stuff. Jesus Christ, Barb. What the hell am I doing here? So there we go, flat. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up the gold. And there, that little piece of rouge paper just puffed off. And you can see the gold. There, it doesn't look good. Let me flatten it back out. There we go. So that little piece of gold is going to get shredded and spread out as I turn it. I got to keep this heated up in the back flame. And here's another large diameter rod. I'm going to get all my gathers and put it on the end of this, interspersed with some other cool stuff.
Do you think much of the gold vaporizes in the process of getting close to this hot temperature?
Some, and there's definitely a big difference between gold encasement and gold fuming. The lower working temperature of the Moretti glass lends itself well to encasing gold, silver, and copper for aventurine. Working with borosilicate glass that has higher working temperatures they'll just melt or burn off. So what you need to do is you fume the glass. So you'd be in like the middle of the flame here, vaporizing the metal, and you'd hold what you want the metal to deposit on further out in the flame, and it would deposit on the surface as like an iridescent finish. It's nice too, I guess. You're wasting a lot of your metals that way. It's just going up the vent here. Oh, I should have showed the vent system when I was doing the pre-show with Marbles the Puppet. Alright, so getting a gather ready to go here. Gold's on the end. Ooh. What it's essentially going to be is a big many-layer sandwich. The bread is going to be the metal layers, and in between is going to be layers of colored dots and the UV sensitive glass. So my first gather is going to go on there like this, and I'm going to pull it off in the flame just so it doesn't get stringy. And you can see there it looks like an ice cream cone where that gather has been put on the first disc. There it is close up. I'm going to squish it flat. Heat it to take the chill marks off the surface. And now you can see there's a disc on top of a disc with gold trapped in between. Ooh. Alright, next we're doing a dot of blue. First one will be opaque blue, and then the next one is going to be a transparent cobalt blue, which should give this a very galaxy look. Sparkling fields of gold and silver spread out over opaque and transparent blue, swirled together so that you can't tell where one begins and another ends. So now I'm going to put a dot on that. How can I do this without burning myself? Alright, let's see.
You said you're making a tornado?
Yeah. So that's a little bit too much color. I'm actually going to take some of that off. Make it a little bit smaller. The color I take off, I could quench, or I'm actually just throwing it onto a metal plate to cool off. I can reuse that color again. When I have little bits like that, what I'm going to do is make teeny tiny marbles of it. Tiny. Alright, that dot is on there. It's opaque blue, and it's sitting up. The edges are not merged with the clear below. So I'm going to heat it until they pull into each other. I'll show you that in a second. And I'm heating the other rod in the back flame because I need my next gather of clear. Alright, that is pulled into the surface. You cannot see the edges smooth. When it's to get it smooth like that, it just means when I put the next gather on, it's not going to trap an air bubble. If I had a sharp edge on that transition between the colored glass and the clear glass, where I pushed this next clear gather on, it would trap an air bubble. And that's going to mess up my design. I don't want that.
What are you going to do, George?
I would have to go and either fix that or hope for the best. You know, sometimes when you're drawing or painting or trying to do something that shows a little creativity, things don't go perfect. Like when you're playing music, you know, you don't stop. Keep on and keep up. Here's my next gather about ready to happen. I'm keeping the whole base of the marble hot in the back flame at all times. I'm not just keeping it out, wandering it around, because it needs to stay up at about 1,000 degrees. Alright, here's my gather. It's getting all hot and ready to go someplace. And it's going to go here. There is the gather on top of the blue. Trapped blue.
The blue kind of looks brown.
No air. It actually has an orangish look through my glasses. And then there's the layers. That'll get more pronounced. Alright, next is an invisible layer of this UV glass that I was talking about at the beginning. And I want this to stand, I want this to be on the inside, and I also want it to be by the surface. So I'm going to do a couple different things with this. I'm going to put a dot in the center. I'm actually going to make that dot bigger by wrapping it around the central dot to make a larger blob of that clear. It's going to be hard to see. Here it is. Now I also want it to be in the center of this tornado, but I also want it to be going around that periphery. So I'm going to add a series of dots of this UV active glass. Around the edge of the disc. You can see it pretty good there. I'm going to melt those in. Start heating up my clear rod for a gather again. I pressed it down on my marver just to help those dots sink into the surface. So now it's smooth and they have disappeared.
Does everybody know what a marver is?
Marver is the flat plate that glass blowers use to roll glass and shape glass and rest the glass on for a second here and there. Marver is marble in French. Glass blowers used to use marble to shape their glass. I guess it has some characteristics that people like as far as heat transference. Most people use steel now because it's more commonly available in something that's smooth, and you can vary the thickness to control your heat loss. I go back and forth between a steel plate and a graphite plate depending on what kind of work that I'm going to do. If I want my work to stay hotter, I use a steel plate. If I want to get colder faster, I use a graphite plate. Alright, there's the clear gather that went over the UV active glass. I wonder if you can see that. I can't see it. But you can see the blue in there. So I'm going to squish that flat, get that hot, and the next is going to be the transparent blue. This is the other side of that opaque blue dot, sandwiching that UV glass in between. So when I took some of that opaque blue glass off, is because I wanted to minimize the opaque look of that tornado. I'd like the transparent part to be a little more enveloping of the opaque glass, and so not only did I put a little bit more on there, I melted it in such a way that when I squished it with a paddle, I spread it out a little bit farther than that opaque blue. Now I'm going to melt it in and heat up my clear rod again for the next gather. My marble's getting bigger now, so I'm turning up my torch a little bit. My initial rod that I have most of my marble attached to is starting to crack because I'm taking it out of the flame too much. So if it falls and I cuss, be warned.
if you're easily offended, you're in the wrong place.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, that's pretty hot. See how the layers are starting to melt together. I'm going to keep it in the flame here. Get the next gather going. All right, I got a couple seconds, Barb. If you have any, if there have any questions been flown by.
Oh, actually, no. Although Becky was remarking about how constantly amazed she is by how the shape transforms, and I was thinking, or that really made me think that I'll be happy if you can get a second camera set up so and have it focused on the Marver, because even as I was reading what she had IM'd, you reached over and I saw you squish the glass onto the Marver plate, and seeing how the glass moves on the Marver plate, and the squish that you just did just then is really interesting. And when the melting glass is in the flame, you don't see it move that much, and so that's like
It's slower.
the
Yep.
as exciting part. The exciting part is when you get to see the glass squish around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like when I bring it out to show it, it's a series of snapshots. Unless you're watching the whole time. Woo! Layers.
A little bit lower. There you go.
When I get it over there, it takes my eyes a second to adjust to see where I am. I think I'm getting better at like getting it in there the first time. All right, now we're going to grab our silver, which has blown around a little bit. Position it on the Marver plate. Yeah, multiple cameras would be nice. I'm looking into it. All right, I'm going to pick up that silver.
Some smartass wants to know if squish is a technical term.
It is, since I am everything I
know it is.
Everything I say is the proper technical term.
Wait, here's one. What's the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? Brad wants to know.
Oh man, been a while.
Something less than a coconut.
So now when I'm heating this big slug in the back flame, I have to make sure that I'm not going to burn off that silver. So I'm being careful to not put it directly into this cone of the flame.
It's in a perfect square, which isn't very interesting looking. Is it going to get squished around again so that it forms a more organic kind?
Right. This is just the build phase. So the build phase has nothing to do with the final shape. And this doesn't even have to do much with the design. This is like an intermediary step where it's essentially a cylinder of stacked dots. The next thing is going to be to get it approximately spherical. Then I'm going to attach handles at 90 degrees from where my clear rod is originally attaching to this. And then I'll attach a handle on the other side, and it will start to impart some spin to it. So I'll be spinning those discs, but not on the axis that I built the marble, but on a perpendicular axis. And so those little dots have turned into very thin discs, and they will get made even more thin and rarefied as they spin around, and will look like little razor blades, just like one atom thick of the color. So now I got all the glass on there that I want, and the last gather that I put on, I'm not going to squish flat, because that end that's away from the handle, this glass rod, I'm going to make into the first part of my hemisphere, and then I'm going to attach a steel to
Putty?
it. A steel, I've been calling it handle because I'm not Italian, so I don't have to call it punty.
It sounds more impressive
If I
if you
use
use magical terms.
magical terms. Punti, puntilla, Italian for bridge. The thing that connects my hand to the work.
Pont, French.
Alright, so I have made that a little bit round and I've attached this metal. Can I get it in the magnifying glass? It's right next to the wall. Urgh. Now it's entangled and stuff. Alright. Now, my original rod is all crackly. I could probably tap it off, but I'm going to give it a little heat and melt it off. Then it's going to trap a lot of bubbles, so I'm going to get in there with my tweezers and try to clean it up. You can see it's getting wobbly now. It's just about ready to do that. Melt it off. And now it looks like an acorn. But that's not cool. That's not how it's, that's not a neat thing. That's a stupid thing. That's an intermediary step that we don't want. No, I don't make acorns. I don't want to make acorns. Alright, let's see. I wonder if you could see some of those bubbles that got trapped at the end. I'm going to get out of there with my tweezers. You can dig down pretty far into the glass if you get it hot enough. So the bubbles I want to get out of this end are probably about 3/16 in there. So if I get it pretty hot, I can go in there and get down about that far. If I was closer to my design and I really wanted to pick a bubble out of there without messing it up too big, I could get just a portion of it hot and then go in with my pick and pull it out so I can do a better job while I'm not looking at it. Pull that. I actually inserted a bubble rather than took one out.
Make it worse, George.
I did. I made it much worse, and I poked in so far. I made a deep one. It'll take me a couple goes to get it out. Like digging a hole in sand, you know, you go so deep, and then it flows back in around you. So you have to make a bigger divot than you want. Okay. It's looking bubble free, and the surface is starting to smooth with just the heat, and I can really see all the layers of dots. So before I chill the surface again and ruin this optical effect, I'm going to show you guys. So there's all the layers, and I'm going to show it in the magnifying glass. You can see even the layer of UV stuff in between the two layers of blue, the big clear blue and the smaller opaque blue, the gold on that side, silver on that side. Alright, actually I'm going to round this one more time just to have a nice central mass to work with. If it's uneven in shape, the twist is not going to come out as even as you like. And that's where it gets so annoying to watch glass blowers in general, because you see them go into the flame and they roll it out a little bit and then they go back into the flame and it's like, what the hell are you doing? Just do the next thing. But they're trying to get their base the right shape and even and symmetrical, perfect for the next part.
Stone Sean is complimenting your technique.
And having it even and symmetrical, and then having the heat evenly distributed, is going to let your manipulations travel or not travel through the glass as you wish. Now, I'm a little oval here, a little football shape, so I'm going to get one more pass through my marble mold, which is my graphite hemispheres. Ooh. And get a little more spherical. And the best way to do that is always go to a hemisphere that's bigger than what you're working on, giving a little pressure and a little spin, and then for your second mold you go to one where you're just using the rim and you're rotating it and changing the axis of rotation, and that brings it into a sphere. Alright, now I've got even heat, but my handle is not on the right axis. I want to switch my axis perpendicular and get two handles or two punties on here. And what I want is, I want that layer of UV glass to be the center axis point. So I want my axis to be attached on one edge of one color on one side and the other edge of the other color on the other side. Don't tell anyone that. That is a secret. And I want this punty to be attached very strongly because I'm really going to twist the crap out of this. Another technical term. That steel handle that I had on there was dug in pretty far on the surface. So I'm just going back in and getting out any metal dust that's in where that was attached. Now you can see my punty is on, pointing right at that color edge. I'm going to get my other one right here on the...
Becky wants to know, how long did it take you to understand how much material to start with to get the appropriate or desired sphere size?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Seeing as how that's an ongoing process, I will say 30 years.
She also
And
wants
I'll
to
let
know
you
if
know.
fear was involved. I think that one part was for me.
Alright, so I've got both my handle on now. And my cylinder is now attached a little bit more than 90 degrees off from its original. Now I'm going to heat this and get the heat as even as I can. And as I'm turning this marble constantly to make the heat balanced within the marble, I'm going to start catching my hands a little bit as I twist. So I'm going to twist with the left and catch a little with the right, just like 5 degrees worth.
And hold on to your seats. This is when the fun starts.
Now the heat is pretty even. The one thing that you have to resist is letting the ends get too hot. So right now I'm switching the focus of my heat to the equator of the marble and letting points where the punties are attached to cool down a little bit. And I'm starting to impart a little bit of spin. I'm going to give it another 30 seconds, and that's about another 30 little tweaks. And you can see it is starting to get a little twisted. So those discs of color are going to start reaching around each other and spiraling. And right now they've only twisted maybe about 60 degrees around. And that has a cool look. But that won't shred the foil. Oop, I'm getting uneven here. That won't shred the foil and gives a tornado look. Now that the marble is all hot, I'm going to let it start twisting a little faster and try to even up the shape at the same time until it rotates around between 10 and 20 times, depending on the density of the colors that I've chosen. Different colors have different opacities and densities before they rarefy to nothing in the clear. So you don't want to overwork them or overspin them. You want to do it as much as they will still look nice. I'm going to slow down a little bit. I got like too much heat. It's getting out of shape. Let it cool down. See if I can get. I got to one complete rotation. And I think as I've made these, there's like some years where I like them with more twist and some I like them with less. So it's a personal choice thing. A lot of times you're sort of getting clear rods in whatever diameters you can find them at. If I pull them myself out of my crucible furnace, they're kind of on the uneven side. If you get ones that are pulled at a big glass shop where they can pull them out like 60 feet, they're very even. But the diameter is not always reproducible for what they're selling that year. So some years you buy them and they're a little bit bigger, and so your marbles are a little bit bigger that year. At least these, where I'm constructing them the same. You can always add another gather or take out a gather as you're building your initial cylinder to control the size. But for me, it's more often about how many layers I'm doing to get the design that I want. And really the finished size, approximate is fine. Alright, slow down a little bit and then show you. I squished the shape. There we go. We got about 3 rotations in there now. I don't know if you could see it, but I'd like squished it into more of an oblate spheroid as I was trying to show it to you, and then as I was coming away, I had managed to pull it back out into the sphere shape. I was momentarily proud of myself for controlling that.
But just momentarily.
Just momentarily. Now I'm not so sure. It's like, what have I done? This is not so great. Actually, it looks pretty good. I got a little bit more spin on one side than the other. I'll try to fix that before I show you guys again. Right now I'm increasing the grab as I'm twisting because the center is feeling really good right now, and if it feels good to do your manipulation, sometimes you just got to take that. See how it goes. So I'm adding a lot of spin right now. Let's pause. Show you guys. I can't get the right angle to show you that razor edge. There it is. Next time I got to remember to move all those cups full of different rods that I have. I'm ready for action there, but
is there anything I can do
it's
to help, or would it just end?
it's annoying. Well, I don't want to bump the camera, so after I finish this marble, I'm going to be doing a blue cornflower for a charity auction, and that's a little more controlled, a little more one handle. This is definitely a two handle. Alright, now I'm adding my last stretch of spin on this guy. And I'm going to let it cool down, and then the next thing that's going to happen is one of my handles is going to get melted off. On purpose.
Oh.
Because I'm going to melt off the handle and start shaping the end of that sphere. And then you'll be able to see the end, and hopefully you'll be able to look like all the way down the pole, because the only thing down the pole will be that invisible UV glass. It doesn't look like I quite got there. Let's see, so it's starting to look a little nicer shaped right now. Ooh. Sparkly. Alright. See, it started to stretch out. I'm going to make it spherical again. I'm going to start in a larger graphite hemisphere. A little spin. Go to a smaller graphite hemisphere. I'm blocking myself here. And then rotate. And change the axis of rotation, and spherical, at least on that side. Bunch of chill marks in it, but that's okay. Let's give it one more pass through the molds, and then I'm going to attach a glass punty onto this side. And get rid of the steel punty. I'll probably go back and forth on glass ones a couple times to get the sphericalness looking nice and perfect. So, larger hemisphere first, just for a few seconds. It chills the surface so that the edge, when you're going to the rim mold, you're not going to dig in and grab, which is very easy to do if the surface is too hot. So you want the surface chill, but the inside squishable like a marshmallow. Alright, I don't need that to be smooth, I just need that to be spherical. Now I'm going to get a clear rod, and I'm going to get not a cold seal, but a smaller one. There's a couple of different ways you can do these punties. Your smallest attachment point is usually like a pencil point. So you make it tiny like that. And you're just melting the end and attaching. There's other ways you can do it. You can make it just regular size. You can make it the bigger surface area than the rod. And if you want it to be even bigger, but with a looser attachment point, you can put a little X in there so you have like 4 attachment points instead of just one big one. So like it's like a claw holding onto the marble, which is great for bigger pieces. If I'm doing a marble that's more like 2 inches, I'll use that claw for the last attachment point. Alright, well, I ended up getting that smooth because I was yapping. So I'm going to grab my cherry wood marble mold and get a nice smooth run through the rims of that cherry wood. I use each rim of the holes drilled through that cherry wood for like just a few seconds because I don't want to char it or use up all the water that it contains. That would wear the mold fast. And I want them to last, and I don't want them to leave burn marks on the marbles or carbon marks on the marbles.
And have you explained to the group how it's the fact that the molten glass is riding on a small layer of steam that is causing such a smooth surface to be able to be obtained?
That is the theory. I've heard some people say that that's not always true, but it sounds good, so let's go with it. So, the cherry wood molds are soaked in water for often years, so they're completely waterlogged. So when you're putting the glass on them, they're just continuing to vaporize the water held in the pores of the marble, or the pores of the wood. The marble's on the brain.
Shocking.
So that as the marble is riding on that burnt, carbonized graphite rim of the wood mold, steam is coming out and keeping it from actually touching the burned wood. Alright, I've attached the glass punty rod. I've done my first pass with the graphite marble molds on that side, and it looks spherical, but it's not. So it needs one more run through the graphite molds. Then I think it'll be spherical enough to do the final pass in the cherry wood molds, and then we will knock it off and put it in the annealer, which is actually a multi-step process. What we'll do is we'll chill the last connection point, punty rod, with some scissors, tap it off into that fire-resistant material, like a space shuttle tile, which I have next to me that has divots in it. And then once it's resting in a divot, I knock off that last attachment point, I'll pick up my torch, and I'll polish the little place where the rod attached to the marble. It'll become smooth. Then I will grab one of these specialized marble pliers that I've made out of wire, heat them to 1,000 degrees, and then I can touch the glass without cracking the surface. Then I will transfer it to my annealing oven, which is essentially a very hot oven that will hold the glass at 1,000 degrees for 1 hour per 1/4 inch of thickness, so that all the stress in the molecular matrix can dissipate, and all the bond angles in the carbon or the silica tetrahedrons will correct their bond angles so that there's no stress trapped as the matrix solidifies.
Honey, I will never get tired of hearing you say that.
Fantastic. Is that sarcasm, or did I say it right?
No, you said it right.
Okay, good. Some of my mouth and some of my marble making is on automatic here. I'm not sure who's driving this bus. Alright, so now I've had my last pass through the graphite molds. The surface is getting very nice. You can see the design is a tornado. Flying around the central colors is all those flakes of gold and silver. So I'm using the reflection above me, the light bulbs, and the spinning of the marble to see that those reflections aren't jumping around. Every time it jumps a little bit, it means I'm hitting a an imperfection on the surface of the marble. So I'm spinning it and I'm waiting for that reflection to be undisturbed by my rotation. It's a constant mirror. And there it went. There it went. So now I'm going to let the surface chill just enough so that I can put it through the cherry wood molds without the molten surface catching on an edge and putting a ridge in the surface that I've tried so hard to keep smooth. But I don't want it to get too cold, because then if it goes through the mold too cold, the surface will chip. So there's a certain sound you want to hear and a certain feel as it rotates, and that's it. That thing is ready to go. So I'm going to use these barber scissors to chill this joint right here in my space shuttle tile. And it popped right off. I pick up my torch and I'm going to polish that end. What I do is I put in a lot of heat, I let it rest and move, and then I can see if there's any impurities there. If there's a lot of flecks and scum floating on the surface, I'll keep turning down my propane and try to oxidize those last little bits off. But I only have a certain amount of time. I really want to get my marble from cracking off that last punty to in the annealing oven in about 30 seconds. So I've heated up these tongs. You can still see they're a little bit orange. They just went to black, so I know that they're hot but not too hot. If they're too hot, they'll dig into the marble. If they're too cold, they'll crack the surface. And there I've got it. It's going into the annealer.
There's general applause all around.
Oh, nice. Well, I appreciate that. All right, next in the pre-show, you saw some of the blue cornflowers that I was making, and it's essentially the same flower marble that I make before, but with a different array of dots around the side, and then I contract my normal flower and do a second array of dots. But in addition to that, I've made a bunch of special stringers that have a central color and an exterior color. You can't see that unless it's melted into a surface. So what I have is I have a purple that's encased in black for the central petals, which is actually kind of like the stamen. Then the next layer is blue with a thin layer of black, and then the next one is purple over blue. And let's see if you can see all the different colors. And so what I'd like to do is actually have a blue one with a light blue casing on it. And so I'm going to make one real quick and use that in the flower that I'm going to make. So what I'm essentially going to do is I'm getting the interior color. I'm going to keep that up, and then I'm going to get gathers of the exterior color and wipe it along the outside of the rod. So see, that's kind of warm. Just going to keep that warm without making it start to drip. And get some of the outside color very ready to be smeared. Smearing things on other things. So I smeared that blue on that other blue. Now I'm going to do that a couple more times so that the dark blue is covered with the light blue. Number 2. Number 3. Oh, look, there's a little hole. I'll go back and fix. Doesn't really matter, actually. Imperfections add to the organic feel of flowers, which is why I like them so much. It's kind of a a merging of precise technique and, hey, that happened. So now when you see a little hole like that, where is it at? There it is. And that little end that's still blue. Let me get just a little hot gather, and I wiped it over there and closed it up. So I see one more spot I missed. I get that. Now I'm going to get a metal punty. I'm going to attach to that end that I just covered with light blue. Now I'm going to detach the dark blue from the rest of its rod. Put that aside. And pinch off some of that blue. Now you can see there's still some dark blue exposed. So I'm going to go back and cover that light blue.
It looks like an alien proboscis.
All right. There it is. Still some blue. That's where I'll stick my other punty. All right, now I'm going to melt it until it's a blob.
Till it forms its own sphere?
Yeah, kind of like a cylinder, oval thingy. Just till it starts looking like it wants to be all one giant wad of gum. There it is, close up. Now I'm going to attach another steel rod and then I'm going to heat the whole thing up until it is just a hot little ball of glass ready to be pulled into a big thread. And when it goes, it's going to go. Woo! By the speed I pull and sort of watching as I go, I can determine the diameter of the rod. I'm going to pull this down to about 2 millimeters, and there we go. We'll detach it from one rod. There it is. And let's get it detached from the other one. Just going to heat my tweezer so I can touch it without cracking it. And there it is. So I want that to be my last outside decoration petal of the disc. I'm going to start with the darkest and go inside to the inside darkest, outside lightest. There we go. So now usually I start with, I was making little flowers the other week with this diameter rod. This is about a 10 or 12 millimeter. I got this 14 or 15 that I'm going to use for this flower. So it'll end up being just a bigger flower because I think this might be the one. I've made about 7 of these for practice. So I'm thinking the one for the auction is got to be due to come out soon. Alright, I did a terrible job flashing that. It's popping all over the place.
I'm just going to say, thank God I have eye protection on. Stu Sturstein says hi.
Hello. God damn it.
Jesus.
Alright. I'm going to mentally start over here. Alright. Take a step back. Alright, so my second marble. I'm making a blue cornflower. I'm making this on a slightly larger diameter rod than my normal flowers because I want the marble to be slightly bigger because I'm adding more layers of petals. I'm going to start to turn the petals inside out, and then as it turns inside out, I'm going to add more concentric circles and keep collapsing them in. And you reach like a maximum point. So I'm going to try to push the maximum point, which for me has been about 4 rows of concentric circles, not including the petioles, which is the green petals on the outside. And then I'm going to put a backdrop of teal on the flower, and then I've made a special purple and blue twisty rod for decorating that teal point, and then I can sign my name on that little patch of color on the back. It gives the flower like a colored tablecloth it's sitting on if you're looking at it head on. If you're looking at it on the side, you don't see anything, and then if you're looking at it from the back, you see a pretty dot with other dots inside with my little titanium signature. So it looks good, hopefully, from all angles, which is the goal of making a marble. You want it to look good. You know, you have an idea of where it's going to look best from, but you can't ignore all the other views of the sphere.
Kind of like life.
Dude! Nice one. So, I have my graphite paddle ready because unlike that tornado that I made, when I just used the marver plate next to me to flatten the end, I'm going to flatten it, but I'm going to push down on the top of that flattened area to push it out into a disc. And I got to do it quickly because the graphite's going to take a lot of heat out of the glass very fast. But I'm going to go from this floppy gather to a disc in, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 seconds. Let's go.
2, 3, 4, 1,000.
And there it is. That's a big disc, so I've got a lot of area to draw on there. And the first thing is going to be, normally be stamen, so if I was making like a rose, I'd put black stamen in the center. For this one, I've made a black cased purple stringer. So rather than having a definite line of stamen to petals, this is going to have sort of a progression of black to purple to blue to light blue, going from the center to the outside. I turn the flame down to a point when I'm drawing with these tiny threads for control, so that I can put the dots right where I want them to go, and almost right where I want them to go. Alright, so that was the middle. Now I'm going to a slightly lighter cased string, and I'm going to make some petals. And I'm doing 2 lines of these. Then I'm going to shrink and implode this, or inside out it. Alright, so we're done with those. The next one's going to be the slightly lighter. This will be the bulk of the petals towards the inside of the flower. This will be most of what you see as the flower. So there's the initial 6 dots that I put in, and 2 rows of concentric little slugs that I drew on with that second rod. Now I'm going to first melt all those slugs in, then I'm going to start to turn it inside out. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you, Sue. Schnoo. Alright, petals now melted into the surface. Now I'm going to start melting the outside of the disc while holding it at an angle, and it's going to take this disc and start cup shaping it. And I'm going to flatten it. As I cup it and flatten it, it's going to take the outside of the disc and roll it up into the center. Slowly and boringly. Settle in. Get that beer! I want the end of the disc to be hot because I want to change shape along with the edge of the disc. If I let
the end of the disc, do you mean the edge
the
of the disc?
surface of the disc, I want to keep hot, and the perimeter of the disc is going to be hotter. So when it starts to cup, the perimeter of the disc is falling, but the center of the disc is still hot enough so that it's not folding, it's cupping. It's really kind of a feel thing. If you don't do it the way you want, it won't come out the way you want. So there. If you do it wrong, it won't come out the way you want. Or will it? So much of creation can be discovery. And so if you were ever to do glass work, I hope you would realize that everything I'm saying is wrong for you and right for me, or might be a good guideline, a good starting point, but trying to reproduce someone else's work, your arms work different, your fingers work different, it's not going to come out the same for you as it is for me, unless we both so in tune with our arms and our fingers and our hands, we could make those little adjustments, which might be possible, I don't know. I like to think I'm always changing the way I do things a little bit to keep them new and interesting and progressing, moving in a direction, maybe not better, but moving somewhere. All right, so I started to implode that circle. It's contracted. See, it's smaller on the disc from where it was. And if you see on the side, you see it started to travel up into the disc. I paused there, so I'm going to heat this back up just a little bit for a few. All right, and now I'm going to put on my next concentric circle of petals around these 3 circles. Turn my torch down to a point. I switch to my next sheathed color strand that I pulled for this flower. And then my next concentric circle is going to be the even lighter ones. So I'm melting that circle in, and now, ta-da, it's a big circle of them again. So now let's shrink it. Actually, I'm going to tap it flat first, because I don't want those. If I melt the petals into the surface, they'll tend to spread out and get bigger and obscure the design. And so if I want them to stay the same shape, I'll heat the surface and then I'll push them in. And that way, pushing them in will maintain their shape and size, as opposed to if you let the surface tension pull the 2 surfaces together, it tends to spread them all out and make a fuzzier line. I want the line to be sharp. I want the sizes to stay the size that I made them. And it did it. So, now those didn't get bigger, and it's already pulled into the center of the disc a little bit. So now I'm going to pull it maybe like another 2 times, and I'm going to add my next layer of petals. And probably somewhere in there I'm going to show you that it's really started to grow up into the surface. Of the disc. Yeah, there it is. Ooh, looks like a bunch of little tiny, I don't know what, nubs. Flower nubs. Nascent flower nubs. Alright, here's the string I pulled just earlier with the light blue surrounding the dark blue. It's too long. I'm trying to draw with it and it's hitting my sign over here. So I just melted it in half so I can draw with it. Now, since these previous petals have pulled into the center a little bit, they're not laying on the center of this end of the disc anymore. They're up inside of the disc. So I can actually draw the next line almost right on top of that previous circle. But they're actually not touching. They're separated by the surface of the disc. You see a lot of people doing this inside-out technique in like for pipe makers and stuff like that. But it takes a lot longer. But I think when they do it, because the glass is moving so slow, they can control this even more than I'm showing you right now. But it's not as fun to watch. All right. Look at all those circles, dots. Ooh, cool. All right, now I need to find the green that I made for doing the. Oh, there it is. That's also too long.
The general consensus is it looks like a culture in a petri dish.
Yeah. So now these green petioles I'm laying almost right on top of the
Petioles?
last layer of petals that I put on there. Petioles are the green leaves that are around the edge of a flower.
I'm just so impressed that I have a husband who knows what petioles are.
That doesn't mean I'm going to buy flowers. Just means I like to look at them. All right, so I put those green petioles on, and they look like they're right on top of the last circle of the blue, but they're not. They're just on top of the disc still. All right, let's shrink it. It'll be, I'm going to cup it. So the outside of the disc is going to start to flop down. The center surface of the disc is hot, so it's going to pull in as that outside starts coming over. It's going to want to go up into the rod directionally, but it's actually the outside of the disc is rotating. If this disc was actually a donut or a torus, it would be convecting slowly. Now you can really see those petals coming up, blooming into the disc. And that was just like 2 or 3 little cup and pushes. I want to do another 3 or 4 of those. Once the glass gets hot, you can do it pretty fast once you get the temperature right. It's good to pause though and see where you're at. If you go too fast, try to do too many in a row, very often the flower will get stretched or the petals will turn all the way inside out, which is kind of a nice look sometimes. I'd like to get some of that, but I want it to be the way I want it, and not the way I don't want it. It's looking like the way I want it, which I like. Ooh, that's a good view right there. All right. next round of shrinking, and then I'm going to put on the teal tablecloth. There's the little dot under the flower. That's what I call it in my head, the tablecloth. But it's really just taking the little ugly bit from the flower where all the glass is still maybe poking its little trailing edge out from the clear and has oxidized and gotten fuzzy looking and ugly. And with that one little dot, you can cover all that up, and it gives you a surface to decorate on the outside. So, multi-purpose. Now, let's show it. It's like a flower now. Getting there anyway. So if you've seen pictures of the cornflower, the outermost ring of petals are pointy. So I think on my next tries, now that I've really got the layers and the colors doing what I want, I think I want to impart some point to those last outer layers. And I want them also to be pointing out. So I think when I point holes in the disc, I'm just going to angle it out like 10 degrees. And I think that might get me to the final product. Although this one really looks pretty nice so far, if I don't mess it up. I usually mess them up. You can go back and fix them, but they're never the same. But that's fine, there's always the next marble. Alright, so, looks like a flower, kinda. The end is ugly. Actually, it just doesn't look like anything. This one pulled in really nice. But I still like having that little end part to decorate with the little dots. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It's hard to see, but I think I like that little light blue cased, dark blue thread that I pulled for doing that last row of petals on the outside. I put the teal on the end. I want it to be a bit bigger, so I'm going to flatten it out so it spreads by, instead of pushing it flat in, what I'm going to do is just ride it around on a little bit of a hemisphere. Let's see where that gets me. So I think I like that. I'm going to put some dots. I pulled this purple and blue one. There it is. So, the nice thing about doing a two-color thread, twisty thread, is that when you make a dot, it's already a swirled dot of two colors. And there's ways you can control the way those swirls go by when you touch it. If you turn it as you go or you back turn it, you can make like equal dot or a more swirl dot. Something to play with. If I'm decorating, I just try to do it the same for all the dots that I'm doing on that round of decoration. So on this one I did like about a quarter turn as I place the dot, because that's what felt good at the time. Let's see what it looks like. Yeah, B minus. Now I'm going to heat up the whole marble, run it to the graphite molds, get it started as spherical. I'm starting my contact point at, if the rod was north, I'm starting north of the equator and moving down past the equator to the end. So I'm pulling and then pushing, pulling and pushing. And that pressure and texture of the glass, that gets me spherical. Other people might have a different experience. When I've taught this to groups of people at the same time, that explanation seemed to make the biggest, was the most helpful thing to say. Alright, you can see there's chill marks in there. It's not, the reflection is not smooth, and that's okay. What I'm going to do is just get a little steel handle on there. Oops, that one's dirty. A lot of times when I pull threads, there's like junk glass on the ends of these, and so I'll have to like heat them and put them back in the water to get all that little glass to shatter off, so that I'm not sticking broken weird colors of glass into my design. I want this to be just a clean, hot, searing piece of clean steel, attaching exactly where I want it to be, which is, I put a center dot on there that I knew I was going to mess up as my attachment point, because then when I pull this out, it's going to pull that last dot out with it. And so that dot that I put in there is to protect the rest of my design.
Sue wants to know how many marbles you think you've made over your entire lifetime.
Well, I have no idea. Alright, so let's see. Marbles since 98. Probably about, 1,000 years, so 20,000?
I was thinking the exact same number.
I think that's probably pretty reasonable. So, there is the flower, and you see I've got like some clear on the end where that rod was attaching to the disc. So there's a lot of different ways I can pull this clear off. I can pull it off a little bit at a time. If I want to lengthen this whole thing, I could grab this and pull it and then wait for it to cool so that I could pull a rod out of the end of this marble. But that is just showing off. Got some glass stuck to my tweezers. Handy tweezers! Alright, now the flower is filling up most of the marble. Let's get it spherical and see what it looks like, because that end is sticking out a little bit right now, but it's sort of egg-shaped, so I think it's gonna, this is looking like it's gonna correct just perfect. You don't want to squish it, so I'm just gently nudging it spherical. It's squishing or not squishing. Sometimes you squish it the way you want. Sometimes you don't squish it the way. Here. No. Let's see. Can the camera light change? Nope. Let's shine it up. It's a little bit non-spherical. A little bit pushed out. Alright, the surface just resolved into smoothness for me, and I'm looking at it, and it looks really nice. There's a little bit of a bubble right in the center which I'm going to say is magical looking. Not a mistake. It's like a fairy dewdrop. Yes, it's okay to laugh at that, Barb. So whenever I can go in my mold and spin it really fast, and it just goes, that is very spherical. All right, and but the surface has got a couple chill marks on it. I'm going to heat it one last time, let the surface calm down a little bit, hit it with my cherry wood mold. Then I'm going to get a nice clean pencil tip punty and do my last attachment point on that clear surface. So, here's my marble. I'm sorry if I splashed you, Barb. I'm not used to people sitting there. I'll go through a couple of these little teeny tiny divots. My marble. It's going to impart a nice smooth finish and also chill the surface, so it's hard enough to take my next handle. Yep, that's almost the way I want that to come out. Alright, I want my last punty to attach on this big clear surface, so I want a clean punty end out of clear glass, not recycled glass, new glass. And those light blue rods that I have that I normally use for handles, that are all my melted mistakes that I pull back into rods. A lot of them have like just unimaginable weird stuff in them, so I don't like to use those if my last attachment point has to be clean. This one does because it's attaching to a clear marble.
Grady says that dewdrop is funny sounding.
Dewdrop. Alright, now I'm heating and rounding the tablecloth area, which is that little dot that I decorated. Oh, here you can see the back side of the flower and even some of those little petioles peeking out. Got a little bit too cold there. I'm going to heat it back up. Get that last graphite shape in there. Didn't quite get it. Go back and do it one more time. Some days, you just like, you have it. Your control, the heat is perfect, your spin is perfect, marbles are spherical, it's great. Other days, you gotta go back and forth to the mold 3 or 4 times.
So if you drop a marble, how do you repair a dropped marble?
Usually they're ruined. You can pick them up, but then there's crap on the surface, little tiny imperfections that you'll never be able to get out, no matter how long you pick at them. So, your marble should be perfect. Your finishing technique should be perfect, and then your marble will come out perfect. Or it'll be just a marble with imperfections and stuff. So then maybe your next one will be perfect. Wow.
So I assumed the question pertained to marbles that you were in the middle of working on, but what about marbles that are like cold and done? And
yes.
You drop them and they crack. Is there any way to
Generally not. I mean, to reheat and put together a marble and have it come out looking nice is nearly impossible. It can be done. I've messed around with it. Alright, so that one, I'm ready to chill that little last joint where it's attached. I'll knock it off into my space shuttle tile and then come back for my torch and pick it up. Or polish it. So I'm sort of just like sawing these scissors to chill that joint, tapping it to see if it comes off. I'll go back and tap it again. This time it came off. Now I picked up my torch. I'm polishing that little end. I'm doing it in little steps, giving it heat for a second or two, coming away, letting the surface tension fix the surface. Now, I'm going to grab an appropriate sized pliers. I've got like 10 of these different sizes. Heat up to past the temperature where I want it, so orange, and then it's coming down, and when it hits black, this is the right temperature. I can pick up my marble. There it is. And I'm going to put it in my annealing oven. There. Now, how did we do for time? Oh, we're way over again. I apologize for keeping you longer than I said I was going to, but haha, you stayed. So it must have been okay. So that's it. What I'm going to do now, since I'm done for the evening, I'm going to bleed my torches. So I'm going to turn off my main pressure valve on my oxygen. Let the oxygen come out. Turn off my fine pressure. Turn off the oxygen at my torch. Now the oxygen is bled out, turned off at my torch. Next is the propane. I'm going to turn off the main valve. Let the propane in the lines burn out. And when it gets all done, turn off that valve. And that's done. And then usually I leave a mess. And when I come back the next day or whenever I'm going to do torching again, I sort of clean and set up, thinking about what I'm going to work on that day mostly. I usually try to throw in something fun, but for the most part, like if I'm going to do bees that day, I'll try to do like 10 bees and then a marble for fun. And usually if I'm going to do one marble, I do two. So then by that time, I've spent a lot of time at the torch and I'm ready to be done. In which case, there's a big mess. Anyway, thanks for coming. I really appreciate you guys watching. And I will be back next Wednesday. I'm not sure what I'll do yet. I might do my final blue cornflower. If I have that finished by then, probably post something on the group about an auction. I think I got it figured out. Anyway, here we go. Pavliscak Studios. Check it out. And I don't have a sale word right now. I'll post it in the group for free shipping this week. If anyone decides to get something, I'll have some beer mugs going on. And I have some funny advertising that I want to do for that. Something to do with drunk puppets, I think. We'll see. Okay, bye-bye. Mwah.